In this demonstration, I'm going to show you how you can use Edge Animate to get started with interface building. So first thing, when you open Edge, we're going to go up here and just do a new file. And first thing you'll notice about the way that the interface is set up, and this is, by the way, CC 2015. So, if you're using a different version, it might be very slightly different, but it'll basically be the same. First thing I want to talk about really quickly is how you can get started in the interface. I'm going to go ahead and save this file. We'll do a save as. And I'm going to save it on my desktop in my Edge Animate demo. And we're going to call this Animate-demo. And I'm going to just save it right out here in the main area. And you notice that it saves it out as an HTML file, or we start with an HTML file, and that file is called Animate-demo. If you take a quick look at the file system though, and you look inside that folder called Edge Animate Demo, you'll notice that in addition to having the original folders that we had, which was images and also video, we also have all this other stuff. We have animate-demo.html, we have an animate-demo.an, which is the Edge Animate native file that's going to store all of this information. And then we also have some JavaScript things. So we've got some 3 different files. In addition to that, we have Edge includes. If you look inside of that, we have some more JavaScript stuff. So basically, if you look at all of this that's highlighted, those are all the files that just got created when we saved that project. Okay, so let's get back to this, and I want to just talk about some of the panels really quickly. First off, you'll notice that over here we have a lessons section. If you wanted to walk through any of these lessons, you're more than welcome to. These are actually really useful, and they've got files that are built right into the interface so that you can open them and work on them and follow directions and get like really quick little things working. If you want to make that go away for now though, you can close this by clicking the X panel. If you ever want to get that back though, you can go up to Window and you can choose Lessons here, and it'll pop right back up for you. Okay, so I'm going to close that again. Now, let's talk about these other panels. On the left, we have a Properties panel, and the Properties panel is going to always pertain to whatever is currently selected. So right now, if you were to look down to the right in the lower area, we have this other panel that's going to be the timeline. And right now the stage would be the only thing that is available. So right now the properties panel is relative to what the settings are for the stage. And you'll notice that it says div. If I hover over it, it says div stage, and it says static. Now, you don't have to know HTML to do this, but just so you have an understanding, this is going to write the file in HTML, and a div is an HTML markup tag, and static is a CSS positioning state. So you don't have to worry about if you don't know what that means. If you do, though, that might be useful. If you've taken any classes or you know any HTML stuff, then that might be useful to you. And then over here in this part of the timeline, you'll notice that there's a scrubber or playback head. And when we actually have animation, you'll be able to drag this timeline out, and you'll be able to make keyframes and things like that. Right now, we're not going to make any keyframes. The other thing too is that you'll notice there's this little stopwatch, and if you hover over it, it tells it that it's disengaged, and it says click to record edits on the timeline. Now, we don't want to record the edits right now, so if you just leave that disengaged, then you'll be good. And then we'll talk more later when we get into stuff about this toggle pin, but we're not going to worry about that right now, okay? And if you look over on the right side, you'll see that there are elements, and there's another panel for library. Elements are going to be things that are actually being currently used on the stage, and the library are going to just it's going to be a set of things that are there for you to use, but they're not necessarily currently being used. So we'll import some stuff, and you'll notice right off the bat that images, because we saved our file in the root level directory, you'll notice that images is already being populated because we had that file in an images folder. It knew to look for a folder called images, which is really helpful. It's not doing that for videos. We have to actually import the videos. So we'll do that in just a moment. But you'll see here that it's got this picture for me that maybe I'll use, maybe I won't. But I can if I want to. So I'm going to collapse this, and then also this is where later if we make symbols, we'll get into what that means later. They'll show up here, fonts, audio, if we want audio clips, and then video clips, and then if we added additional scripts, which we're probably not going to do for this demonstration, but that's where they would show up. Okay, and then right here where it's white, that's the stage. And it's basically, I mean, if you think about a theater and a stage, it's the same principle where you have actors or instances of acting on the stage. So it's going to be very similar to that. A stage is where something that's time-based occurs. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by adjusting the properties of the stage. So while stage is selected, we can come up here and first of all, and we can change the color. And let's just say that we want the actual background color to be, I don't know, sort of this black color. That's one option. Another option would be that if we wanted to change it so that it's sort of in this blue range, we could. Really, it's kind of up to you. I might make my background this kind of bluish color because you'll see later that I might want to put a video of the sky back there. And it might be nice to have that as the sort of the opening color at the very beginning, if it makes sense. Also, you'll notice down here that it starts with RGBA. If you've ever done anything in the web, then you've probably been exposed to RGBA. That means red, green, blue, alpha, and those are the values for the red channel, the blue channel, the green channel, and the alpha channel. And 1.0 is 100% basically. So if you were to do like 0.5, then it would give it about 50% transparency. That's one way to color code the value for these colors. Another way would be looking at the hexadecimal number, and again, this is something that you typically use in screen-based media, specifically web. And HSLA has to do with hue, saturation level for brightness, and alpha channel. So this is another way that you can depict color. So if you wanted to add this color to a swatch, you could click the plus symbol, and now it'll always be available for you. By the flip side of that is if you already have sort of like a color palette that you've chosen, you could go in here and you could just load all of those hexadecimal values or RGBA values, and you could then just add them to swatches so you could use them at any time. Anyway, so I'm going to click off of that, and now my stage is this sort of pale blue. Another thing that I can do is go ahead and set my stage size. So I'm going to set it to, let's say 1920 by 1080, which is a standard 1080p size. All right, and then these little light switch looking things would be if you wanted to switch it to percentages instead of actual dimensions. Right now we'll just keep it at dimensions, but we might go back later and do percentages. The other thing that you can do too is tell the stage to center. We can tell it to do it horizontally, vertically, or both. We'll just say both. And that way, whenever it shows up on an HTML page, it'll automatically center the stage for us. And also, I'm going to say to go ahead and choose responsive scaling. What that'll do is it will allow us to scale the stage and anything that's in it so that regardless of what dimension the browser width is, it will actually correct that for me, and I'm only going to scale based on width, and then everything else will automatically stay in proportion in its scaling. So let's just do it that way. Okay, and then you can leave preloader set to immediate. That's a pretty reasonable default setting. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and save this, and you notice that the asterisk disappeared. The other thing up here, you'll notice that there's a little tool set. And this is a very limited tool set. If you're used to using something like Illustrator or Flash, you're going to probably notice right away that there is an absence of something like the pen tool or the polygon tool, where you can make sort of fancier shapes. This isn't it doesn't have the same kind of full support that say Flash would have, because it is geared towards doing a slightly different and more directed or more targeted work with the web. It doesn't draw by default such complex shapes. One of the things that you can do, though, if you really want something that is sort of a more complex set of shapes, that's a good idea, is you're going to want to import that artwork. And you can do that in Photoshop or Illustrator. My recommendation is if you're just getting started and you want to do some testing, it's a little bit easier to sort of map out your stuff in raster graphics, so Photoshop might be a better choice. So you would kind of build up your layer comps in something like Photoshop and then import them. Okay, so in fact, I can even show you something that I had done. And let's jump over to Photoshop. This is a document, it was a picture that I had open, and it has a mask attached to it. If we were to get rid of this mask you see right here, then you would see just like a bright white light from the sky. And you can kind of see that from this thumbnail right here. Now, the other thing too is that this black background was a layer that was just added so that I could, make sure that the pixels were pretty clean and I could see anything that looked kind of ugly. But whenever I went to go save that out, I saved it as a transparent PNG. And this is the kind of thing that you can do is, go into like Photoshop and you can start building up your comps. And if you wanted to, maybe have layers of color that flash over these different sections, you could do something like that and then import your artwork. You don't have to do all of that at once. You can do that little by little. And as you save your stuff in that images folder, it'll show up in your Animate project because it's automatically seeing that images folder, and it listens basically to that images folder and will populate in your project based on what shows up in that folder. So anyway, let's jump back over to Animate and let's just start getting some stuff here on the screen. So the first thing that I want to do is go back into my images, and let's just go ahead and add something into my images. So, or excuse me, into the stage, and I can just drag this straight from, well, let's just do this. I need to click the name of it, drag it straight from here, and you see that it gives me like a registration point, and I can go ahead and make sure that it registers up at the top, but you'll notice right away that I'm zoomed at 100%. If I drop this, it doesn't put it in the right place. I'm going to undo that. I could just adjust it if I wanted to, but let's zoom out to like say 25%. Now you can actually see the entire stage, and it'll be easier to get that registration point right from the start when you drag it. So let's drag that back. You see that it snaps right to 0, 0, and now this is what I've got. And you'll notice that the picture is actually larger than the stage. So if you wanted to leave it big like that, you could leave it big like that. The other alternative would be that you can kind of close that up, and let's just do that. And I'm going to hold down Shift while I'm dragging it, and it happens to be the same aspect ratio, which is perfect, so it snaps right there to the stage. And you'll notice that it does two things when I add that image, is that it shows enclosed building down here on the stage, and it puts it in a div. If you highlight it, you'll see that it's going to put it in a div. And then up here, you see that the enclosed building is up here as well in the elements because it created an element for us. And if I wanted to turn it off, I could hide the visibility like that. I can also hide that down here as well. Okay. Okay, so now let's say that we want to get the sky back here playing behind this image of the enclosed building. So what I want to do, there are two ways I can do this. I can either click this plus symbol and I can go and I can import it this way, and what it'll do is it'll just import it into the library. Okay, that's one way. Another way is that I can also go up to File, Import, like this, and what it'll do is it'll import it straight to the stage. And yet another way, if you so desire to do it, you can also go and you can find it in your Finder or Explorer, and then what I can do is I can literally drag it straight to the stage, and you see that it's showing me a registration mark and it snaps to 0, 0. That's one of the things that I could do. You might not want it snapping to 0, 0, but just so you know, that's one of the ways that you can add stuff. I want the sky to be playing behind it. If you were to look at this, you'll notice that up here in the elements, the sky video is actually on top of the enclosed building, and also down here as well. So there are two ways. I could either grab this up here and I can drag it down below. That's one way of doing it. I'll undo that. Another way is down here in the timeline, I can actually take Sky 2, or I could take enclosed building and do it the other way around, but I can right click on Sky 2, or I say arrange and say send backward, and it puts it back there. So those are two different ways that you can move the stuff around, and you see that it updates both of these panels.